Welcome to Curious Joel, a show about curiosity taking us deeper into the topics of people's passion and interesting conversation. I'm your host, Paul Circo. Today, I have yet another one of my siblings on. Today, we have Paul Circo. Paul, what is your passion?
Well, one of my passions is relationships.
Do you mind expanding on that a little bit? What does that mean? Because, there's a lot of ways that people could take that. That could mean you're really into daytime TV. That could mean you're into reality TV. What does that mean for you?
Relationships is more with the reality of people and how they work together. There's multiple levels of this passion, how it's expressed itself in my life.
Okay.
For instance, when I was in college, I got my degree in communications because I really needed to be able to speak better and present my ideas before people. Not necessarily in a public arena, but it has led to that. But also relationships, just relationships between myself and my wife, my friends, my siblings, my children. There's this whole tree, we're all connected.
Right.
And studying those relationships and investing in those relationships are one of my highest priorities in life.
And don't you have a degree that also helps, that you learned more about that too?
Yes, so after finishing my communications in the bachelor's program, I went on and got a master's degree in counseling psychology. My goal originally was to counsel college students because I went through college and realized that 95% of the college students had no idea what they were doing. They needed a lot of help and guidance.
Right.
And I wanted to be there to help them. And as part of that journey, getting my master's degree, I learned a lot about couples therapy, children's therapy. I did 250 volunteer hours of intern working with a formerly homeless population that was going through transitional housing. Okay. And got to deal with real patients and real problems, and saw this issue of relationships is really at the core of most of those people's problems.
Interesting. So let's start at the beginning. Where did this interest start? What first caught your attention? What piqued your curiosity?
Well, I am an introvert. I started life being the quiet twin. My twin brother, John, who's an extrovert. Which
everyone out there in podcast land, you've met John before. And so, this is his younger twin. By, what?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, yeah. So Paul also is one of the, I guess, not few extroverts. You're on the extroverted side of the family. Because we're about split half and half between extroverts and introverts, right?
I'm on the introverted side.
Yeah.
I present as extroverted now because of my training.
I've trained for this.
It may sound silly, but I have.
Yeah.
But a lot of my introversion goes towards looking at myself and how I fit into the world around me. And so, as an introverted brother of an extrovert, and seeing how he and I related to younger siblings and friends, that got me thinking about, why are people different? How do these relationships work? And especially when I went to college, and the first time I was away from John for more than 3 days was the first summer between freshman and sophomore years of college. I worked at Pine Summit Christian Conference Center. 10 weeks. No John. And 5.5 weeks in, I realized I hadn't made any friends yet.
Because John
was the bright star.
John made the friends, and then you're like, hey, nice to meet you too.
Yep. And there were many times when John would make friends, and they would gravitate towards me after he met them.
Right.
But he was the attraction.
He was the icebreaker to oh, hey, look, there's a person over there.
So I realized there was a lot to personality that I didn't understand, and especially that first summer, I was praying, God, why don't I have friends? And God was like, because you're not trying. And I realized that I needed to put effort into it, and I needed to understand myself a little bit better before I could present myself to other people as friend material.
Right.
So the relationship aspect has always been there, just as an introvert going, why does everything work the way it works? And why am I in the position I'm in, where John's in the position he's in, or James or Rose or whoever it is? How did they get connected the way they're connected?
Interesting. So kind of moving timeline wise through this, so you have that like personal curiosity of looking at the world and trying to figure out why does this work? Why do these people do these things? Why do those people not do those things? Like, what's the next step? Because so basically from where we just talked about, you eventually got a degree.
Yes.
Studying relationships and learning how they work and how to make sure they work better. Let's kind of fill in that gap. So like, what's the next step after, like, what's going on?
So as I started realizing that John and I functioned in relationships differently, and as I started making friends on my own, I realized that there were personality differences beyond what I had just observed.
Right.
So I think freshman year took PD 105, personal development.
Okay.
It's an early class. Every college student has to take it, or at least that was one of the standards, where you learn time skills, you learn relationship skills, you learn a little bit about your own personality, you learn some quick memorization techniques and things like that.
Did you take like personality quizzes?
Yeah.
What was, just out of curiosity, what was the quiz that, like, what personality spectrum were you guys working on?
We used the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, and on that, I would have to re-look it up, but ISFJ.
ISFJ?
Yeah,
I know,
which means...
INFJ.
Yeah, INFJ, okay.
Yeah.
Introverted, sensing... No, it was ISTJ, thinking, judging.
So introverted,
sensing,
thinking,
judging.
Okay.
And that mostly means that I look at everything through the lens of me, which means that sometimes my perspective on other people is skewed because I go, I wouldn't do that.
You have a panoramic view.
I have a panoramic view, yeah. You could say that.
I mean, it's a single focal point spanning a very broad space.
Yeah. And as I interacted with more students in college, in high school I had class days where I was with a broad variety of people, but it was still limited. These are all homeschool families I was around. These are all kids who had been brought up in homeschool families. And so it was broader, but it wasn't very broad. When I got to college, I saw the full spectrum of people and human behavior at a college level. Right. And as I was progressing in my degree to be able to present myself clearly, to think through what I wanted to say and to deliver it properly, I saw a lot more of that personality dynamic. And I think I wasn't as much drawn to the personality types as I was drawn to why people are motivated to do things they do. And I saw a lot of that was relationship driven. Many of the students...
Interesting.
Many of the students were in college not because they wanted to be there, but because their parents expected it of them. Or demanded it of them.
Right.
Many of the students were in there to fulfill family expectations. They were there because their older siblings went there. Why would they go anywhere else?
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to go, well, okay, I can understand that. And yes, my twin brother and I are at the same college. But John and I independently decided that was the college we wanted to go to.
Right.
Now, it was laughable when we got our college acceptance letters and they told us who our roommates were going to be. They introduced us to each other.
Wait, I think I heard this story a long time ago, but I'd forgotten. Because growing up, visiting them at college, I just kind of assumed that they asked to be in the same place And like,
I'm pretty sure we asked the first semester if we could be in the same dorm room because we already knew each other. We didn't want to have our first year at college disrupted by learning somebody else's routine. But we still got a letter saying, congratulations, this is your room number, and your roommate will be John Circo. I'm like, whoa, he's got the same last name as me.
It's like, I've shared a room with him since before I was born.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, looking at how people were driven into making decisions by relationships and seeing some of that at close view, relationships that I had with some of my best friends, even relationships with girlfriends, I saw this relational driven dynamic happening in the decision-making processes. And I was thinking, you know, there's a lot of burden in the emotional weight of relationships going into some of these decisions that people are making.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to that college because it would separate us. I'm not going to do this, or I am going to do this because of who I want to be around. I heard all of the time about personality issues in workspaces. So many people saying, I can't stand to be in the mailroom with so-and-so.
Right.
Or I'm only visiting the computer lab when so-and-so is not there.
Right.
Or I'm going there tonight because so-and-so is there.
Right.
And I realized that a lot of the college students' decisions were being made for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it was because of other people, for better or for worse, like as a positive or negative, either avoiding or attracted to the people.
And that's to say nothing of the peer pressure.
Sure.
But
versus like what logically would make the most sense of like, this is the best time for me to go in. It was, well, I'll figure it out just so I can say hi to my best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have peer pressure.
And the dynamic of peer pressure. I know that I was sheltered from a lot of peer pressure as a kid, but I didn't realize how much I was sheltered from peer pressure and how immune I was to peer pressure until I got to college.
Oh, sorry. I lost it. I find peer pressure quite funny, personally. And I've actually had to tell a few people recently about how simple it is to have peer pressure not affect you.
Yes.
Not easy, necessarily. For the majority of the population, not easy. But I would tell them, like, I was the kid that when all the kids were playing tag on the playground, someone would grab, like, tag, you're it. I'm like, no. Like, no, you're it. You have to play now. It's like, I'm going to walk that way. It's like, but you're it. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm leaving now. Bye. And then they're like, wait, who's it? I'm like, I don't understand why that, like, that was like this indelible, like, bond between everyone that you got tagged. Now you owe your life to this game until you get out. Oh, no, what are you going to... I'm like, it's just... You just walk away. There's nothing that, like, chains you to this game. It's a social construct that, like, people peer pressure other people into, like, oh, no, I have to play now. It's like, you just walk away.
Have I told you the sardine story?
No, I don't think so.
So, sophomore year, new student orientation week, all the returning students are back, we get put into teams, and it's this big relay. And each station, we were told at the station what we were doing. And so we were assigned a number, and in my case, I got 2 numbers. And so each person had their assigned number, and when the next thing came up, whoever had that number had to go do whatever it is. My first number was a dizzy bat. You know, put your head on the bat on the ground, run 3 circles around it, and then run in a semi-straight line.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was fine. My second number came up, and they opened this basket, and all the teams are on the stage of the LCC and Christian Heritage College where the competition was being held. And they pull the basket up, and there's cans of sardines. The first person finished. Once you finish the sardines, you move on to the next thing. And they pop open the cans and hand them to us. And I go, I'm not eating this. Oh, no, you got to eat it. It's part of the game. Like, I'm not eating it.
Yeah.
And the student to my left, who was a freshman, goes, you're not eating it? Why aren't you eating it? I don't like fish. I'm not going to eat them. You can do that. Well, I'm not going to. Well, if he's not, I don't want to. Oh, the junior to my right goes, if they're not eating them, I don't want to. The senior on the far left goes, if nobody's eating them, can we just put them down? And the organizer goes,
just a defeated sigh.
I just broke the peer pressure by
not.
No.
Yeah.
My whole team can cheer all they want. I'm not going to eat fish. Raw fish with their heads on, the bones in, they've been gutted, but
still, yeah.
I'm not eating sardines.
Yeah.
And I realized at that moment that my peer pressure, my valve is shut off.
Yeah.
Because my twin brother John has always been there to back me up. And I know if everybody else in the world thought I was crazy, weird, dumb, or whatever, yeah. John had my back. And just having that one person made it really easy to say, I'm not doing that.
Right.
And then once I was solid,
once you had put your foot down, everyone else was like, wait, there's another option.
Yeah. So many people go through life just tumbling into whatever they're told to do next. And that was what got me started thinking about maybe I should be a school counselor, go into college counseling and help college students realize they don't have to tumble through life just doing whatever someone else says to do. They don't
just have to be a doctor because that's what their parents told them they have to be. They don't have to go to this college if it's just because their girlfriend's here or their parents, that's their alma mater or whatever. Like, showing them that there are other options, even though it doesn't feel in your... Sorry, not trying to offend anybody. From my perspective, it's a very narrow-minded perspective of options. Going like, okay, just like take a step back for a second. Look, all of this is in front of you. Like showing them the other options they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that perspective.
And it was a lot of fun and something that as I was growing personally, I applied to my life. Like when I was dating Kara, we had just started dating in October.
Kara is his wife, by the way.
Yes. For 18 years and 1 month. Oh. Just about. Kara had already signed up to transfer out of Christian Heritage College and go to the Master's College so she could go do a semester in Israel. And we just started dating maybe a month and a half. And she says, I could cancel it. I don't want to be apart from you. I'm like, Kara, I want to go to Israel for a semester. If I had known this was an option, I would have signed up for this.
Right.
Go.
Right.
We will be okay.
Right.
And if we're not okay with this long distance, it's a good thing we find this out now.
Right.
But you will never get this opportunity to go to Israel again. Don't do something dumb because you think it's required by the relationship. And that was one of the healthiest things that Kara and I ever did for our relationship. We'd been dating for a month and a half, and then she went north to Northern California. Then she went to Israel for 5.5 months. And all of our communication had to be on the phone or an email or occasional letters. So we got really good at communicating. Yeah. Without having to worry about physical things.
Right.
And then it was such a relief when she came back to the United States. There are some stories of things that she decided to do in Israel and in Greece that scared me when she told me about them, which she didn't tell me until she got back. And it's a good thing because I would have been like, okay, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But it was something that I saw. I didn't want her life to be defined by my expectations or her perception of my expectations. So that was blending a little bit of that communications. And I went from there into the counseling psychology, and I realized that there's power dynamics in relationships too that need to be understood and balanced out if you're going to have a healthy relationship. And so that kind of led me into the next step of my life and studying relationships.
Okay. Out of curiosity, and this is something I found in like what usually is our icebreakers and stuff like that. And it's what's your favorite class you've ever taken?
Ooh. Introduction to Interpersonal Relationships with Professor Lori Florin.
Okay.
It's a very specific class. It's an intersection between communications and psychology. Interpersonal relationships goes beyond communication, where communication, if I'm effective, is me conveying a message to you and you understanding it.
Right.
Not just talking at you, not just flashing messages at you, but to where you understand and are able to tell me what I told you.
Right.
Psychology is where you tell me something and I read the context of your words, not just the text of your words. And sometimes I read the subtext of your words to understand what's going on inside your brain. Interpersonal relationships studies how you and I each are projecting images of what we want the other to think or see or hear, and then going underneath the media to understand the message between two people and opening that up and being real with each other. And it was one of the first times I got to see how the dynamics of different personalities really interplay with each other, and how my personality type as a diplomat helps me almost never have trouble with people, because my underlying motivation is to even things out, calm things down, and understand what it is that you're trying to do, what your motivation is, what your goal is, what are you feeling. And rather than being about me, my diplomat personality is, how about you? How can I take care of you? What are your needs? And so that was really eye-opening to me, because as the twin of an extrovert, I didn't understand that's how we worked together. John was the excitement, and I was the, okay, make sure everybody's being heard too. Not that John doesn't care about people. He loves people. But sometimes, especially when we were younger, and he wasn't, I mean, we were both less mature, but he could broadcast his desires so loudly that people would just be taken in and do things whether or not that was what they actually wanted to do. And I had the job of being that balance of, okay, that's what John wants to do. I didn't hear you say, was that what you wanted to do? And it wasn't like that all the time, but that was something that I developed because of our personalities and the way that we relate in a dynamic way to other people.
Sorry, my brain's been trying to formulate like a proper analogy, because what comes to my head, and I don't feel like this is as accurate as most of mine are, but is flight. So for a plane's wing to work effectively, there is air going over and there's air going under, and like just like aerodynamics in general is balancing the forces of what you're going through and what you're putting out yourself. Like it's balancing those two things of what's already there and what am I bringing to the table, basically. And like the dynamics of wings, I think aerodynamics of wings, is adding more into that from the forces that are coming at you. It's using that as a tool to help actually lift and carry. And that's the best thing that I could think of, but I feel like it's not much simpler than the way you put it. Usually I'm pretty good at analogies and like bringing it to a different level of understanding, but that's about as complicated as what you had already said.
Human relationships are one of the most complicated things, and there aren't great full analogies for relationships outside of very simplistic ones. But
but what you're talking about with like the interpersonal relationships is how like our family communicates in not using actual words. It's like, can you yeah, I got the napkin for you. It's like, thanks. It's like, what language was that? Because that was like, you said one English word and a bunch of noises.
Intentionality.
Yeah, it was like, but they understood, and it wasn't like could you please speak up next time? Like, you know, but that like dynamic of, you don't need to necessarily say all the things that you want to say, but you can still get the whole point across without using all the words that most people that are unfamiliar with themselves would have to use. Like, we can still say all the things. We don't, like, sometimes it doesn't even take, like, I mean, I was talking to one of my friends before about, like, it's like stream of consciousness that like are trying to like the government tries to train like Navy SEALs on, and like these elite squads to like nonverbal communication, not like hand signals, just like you just move as a unit. And like our family has that with throwing things. Like, there's no heads up, I'm gonna throw this pen at you. It's just you throw the thing and then someone else catches it. Why? Because it's a thrown object. It's a standing understanding in our family that, oh, it's going to take a lot more work for me to walk this over to you, unless it's dangerous, obviously, or really difficult to throw, or something like that. But most of the things, like small objects, we don't walk it over to each other. We throw it at each other, and we catch it. There's no heads up. Oh, yes, I've got it. It's just a catch. Okay, cool.
That's largely your fault.
It's my fault? How is that my fault?
Partially kidding. But as a baby, one of the first things that you learned to do was not roll a ball. You'd take a ball in your hand, you'd look at it, look at us, and the first warning we had was your hand doing that, throwing it right at us. Not a squeak, not a giggle, not a wind up. You didn't have much of wind up. You pulled back and it was gone. And so we developed the cat-like reflexes of Joel is in the room. There is an object that might fly at your face. So peripheral vision and quick reflexes are the order of the day.
You're welcome, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was my fault.
We had the quick reflexes and the panoramic vision before, but it got put to the test by you.
You know, I had a friend say, you know, it was during like 2020, because someone was saying like, oh yeah, we should do daily tests, and there's like, Joel tests everyone every day. It's like, thanks. But I didn't know that was my fault. But yeah, but like that's something that like, it's funny to watch people come to our family gatherings, and then it's like, whoa, did you just throw that at you? It's like, yeah, I guess without context, it's a little weird.
That's not normal for most families.
But it's pretty
it's normal
every day
for us.
Yeah, but again, going back to that, like, it's not necessarily the words communicated. It's not necessarily like we have a hand signal for these things. It's not built up that. It's that like subtext, that underlying understanding of things.
And it's the trust and relationship built.
Well,
because
similar to the throwing.
In order to get to that point,
right,
you have to have very clear communication. Mm-hmm. I mean, you didn't communicate clearly with us as a baby, but as we grew up and kept doing stuff like that, we made it clear that we only throw things to each other when we've looked, made eye contact.
Right.
We don't throw it at the back of somebody's head, but we make eye contact and the intent to throw an object that was asked for sometimes and other times not asked for.
Right.
But the intent to throw is communicated because we've had that text.
It's built upon actual, like, that text.
Yeah.
That way the subtext is all
the subtext is all that is needed.
Thank you. Like, I had too many words, but I don't remember which ones are too many.
Skip the text, go to the subtext.
But yeah, basically. But yeah, so that's kind of like the dynamic of that interpersonal, like, relationships is the blend of communication skills and psychology blending together to kind of get to that almost like stream of consciousness of like, this doesn't take as many steps. I almost think of it kind of like a stenographer in like a courtroom of like, yeah, you could sit there typing one letter at a time, or you could click chunks of button and it's just a whole lot faster. But it takes a lot of time to get to that point. But once you do, it's a whole lot smoother.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So moving on from there, what's the next step after like you got your degree in this? What are you doing with it now?
Well, that's a great story. I realized, and probably 10 years after the fact, looking back, but in the process, I was certain that God was calling me into a certain field.
Okay.
When I started my master's program, I had one of my professors tell me, when you get your degree, I have a job for you.
Oh.
What he did not know, what I did not know, is that when I started my program, they needed 5,000 new counselors in San Diego County. But the year I started my program, 14,000 students enrolled in programs for master's programs in counseling psychology. When I was getting my internship, which originally this professor had said, I will pay you to get your internship in my office.
Okay.
He had doctoral program students who were in his internship not getting paid.
Oh, wow.
He didn't have room for me. The week I graduated, there had already been 12,000 graduates that year in counseling psychology.
Jeez.
And what they did that I did not is they were involved in counseling offices doing paperwork or something.
They had already
My
started.
resume said I was a janitor because that's what I was. Glorified janitor. But I was a facilities officer. I cleaned toilets. I set up chairs and tables. I had a lot of interactions with the staff on the Shadow Mountain Community Church campus, but I was not in a counseling setting.
Right.
When I finished my master's program, 6 months later, I got laid off at Shadow Mountain. Because, in the words of my CEO, you're marketable with that master's degree. I spent...
Wait, sorry, hold on. Wait, so you got laid off because you're marketable?
There was a budget crisis, and they felt that I had the skills to get a job elsewhere.
Oh, you had the best shot of surviving getting laid off, kind of.
Yeah, and they paid me more because I was a supervisor at that point.
Cool.
So they saved more
Gotcha.
money.
Yeah.
But they said, oh, you'll be fine. I spent 9 months looking for a job, and one of the better interviews, I got a third interview with the hospital, the mental hospital in Chula Vista.
Okay.
And they absolutely loved me. They liked my theories. They liked the way that I presented myself. They liked my attitude, my mannerisms, my language. But I was up for that position with somebody who had a doctorate,
Yeah.
who was willing to get paid the same amount, who had been in the business for 10 years and knew all the paperwork.
Oh, jeez.
Because at that point, and this
It's
is...
oversaturated.
Yeah, this is 6 months after everybody had graduated. The market was so saturated,
Right.
there were no jobs.
Right.
And so people with a doctoral degree and
Are
years
now-
of experience were fighting for the same job that I was.
Entry-level positions.
Yeah, no experience.
Yeah, yeah.
I had my my practicum done, and I was still kind of looking for that internship. I had my marriage and family therapist intern license with the Board of Behavioral Sciences. I kept that for 7 years until I finally decided, you know what, God, I think you've closed enough doors. I think that was for me, not for the world.
Okay.
So, I even applied at one point. We lost our counselor for the church. We had a church counselor
Yeah.
on staff, and he moved to Texas to be with his family. And so I went to the person in charge at the time, Dr. George Cuff, and said, hey, I don't know if you know this about me. I've got a marriage and family therapist intern number. I'm licensed. I graduated with my marriage and family counseling degree, and I noticed you don't have a male counselor in your offices. I also have a master's degree in religious studies. I've been studying the Bible for 20 years at that time.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for someone to fill the other office, I'm a candidate. They decided they were going to outsource the counseling. And that was the 7th year of renewing my intern license. And I was like, well, I think that's it.
Okay.
So I have used my degree. My people skills improved immensely. And sometimes I like to think my understanding of people has improved. But one of the first things they warn you in your first class of the counseling program, don't do therapy on your friends or family.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And so it's a skill set that I have training on, I've done the work for, but at this point, if I were to try and get back into the field, I would have to retest and get a new intern number and possibly start some hours over.
Yeah.
So that's not something I'm actively looking at.
Okay.
But in the same way that God directs our steps, even if we're not, if we have a different goal in mind.
Sure.
I have used the program and my knowledge and expertise to help craft programs for, say, Southwestern Leadership Camp, Summit Leadership Camp, even some of the programs at Chatham Mountain. I've been able to lend a little bit of insight in how they're developed.
Okay. So you have been able to use the degree in your daily-ish life, even though it's not therapy.
Not so much as in a professional capacity,
Sure.
but in a personal development.
Right. Well, something that I've noticed is that the more I learn about human psychology and relationships and stuff like that, it builds my ability to connect to people more so, and usually that also tends to get unbalanced with my ADHD. I learn a lot about ADHD, and the also knowledge that ADHD is one of the most undiagnosed learning. I never know what to call it, because like I don't like phrasing it how it's normally phrased, because I feel like it's too heavy, like the wrong way to phrase it. But also,
disability has taken such a negative connotation when disability just means it's not a full ability.
Right.
It loses something, but the content, the connotation of it has become, you poor thing.
That's why I always have trouble when I'm starting to reference it beyond ADHD, because like it feels derogatory. But like it's one of the most undiagnosed learning disabilities,
and one of the most overdiagnosed learning disabilities, as I found out in my program.
Yeah, well, that's
over-medicated because a lot of schools, and this is completely a side rant here, but a lot of schools think that children should grow up with the ability to sit still, focus, and pay complete attention to one person for an hour at a time. And we train kids to do this, but it's not natural.
No, it's not.
And so a child who has energy will be fidgety and get diagnosed with ADHD or just ADD without actually...
now it's just ADHD. They've been merged together.
They've been merged?
Yep.
Because attention deficit disorder is when you can't pay attention, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Of course, this is DSM IVTR.
I don't remember.
This is a DSM text that I'm...
But basically now ADHD has a few subcategories of which side or which components, because... And there's been also people that are trying to say that ADHD needs to be renamed because it's a misnomer most of the way through for most of the people that have ADHD, quote unquote, under the broad spectrum stuff. And so you have the people that that would have been previously categorized as ADD are in that category just with different labeling and stuff like that. But I've also, like, it's very interesting knowing a lot of the symptoms that go into stuff. Not just my symptoms, but, like, I learn about lots of different people's symptoms that other people deal with. And then talking to people that get very passionate about different topics, I find that a lot of them have a large sum of these thanks, brain. Symptoms. There we go. That's the word that I lost for a second. That I just said 2 seconds ago. But a lot of the symptoms, and I'm sitting there like, I know a lot of people that I'm 80 to 95% sure you have ADHD. Just because, like, I mean, it's something that, like you were saying, like, not natural to just sit still and focus on one thing. But I think that people with ADHD are necessary for this world because the ADHD, the inability to focus on anything that's boring to you, means that you double down on all the things that actually excite you, and you can do that for ages with no interruptions whatsoever. And that leads to the people that I talk to often on this podcast that are like, oh yeah, no, I spent 3 days doing this one thing. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you make spectacular stuff because you dedicate all of your focus, all of your dopamine on this thing that you actually like, and not wasting your time with, going to the bathroom or drinking water or eating or sleeping or blinking. But like, it's the people with passion I find oftentimes have those symptoms of ADHD, and so I feel bad because I feel like being on my podcast is like halfway to a unprofessional diagnosis of ADHD for half the people on my podcast. I'm like, no, I get that checked out, but I don't know it until we've had we were like half an hour in, 45 minutes in. I'm going like, so you tell me you just completely zone out of anybody else. They have to like basically kick you in the face to get you to pop out of your I'm working zone. You don't like it when that happens. Let's see. If you don't like it, you can't focus on it at all, no matter how much you try. I'm like going through. I'm like, you know what that sounds like. But on the other side of that, as I learn about like depression and what that actually looks like, as I learn about other things that other people go through, I start seeing these things, and I'm able, as a person, being able to navigate through those things with them. So instead of, them having to go, well, I really don't, I just don't like being touched, my body responds badly to being touched or whatever. Like, instead of them having to explain, I can be like, hey, I can be their advocate. I can be like, hey, it's not funny to do that. Or whatever that is, instead of them having to speak up for themselves. Them going, hey, they're depressed. Telling them think happy thoughts is not going to help them right now. Going, you have so much going on in your life. It's like, that's great. That's not helping them. I can defend them instead of having to have them sit there and go like, I'm too exhausted to defend myself. I'm just going to like, sure, and fake a smile and then go home and cry. Like, I can be the one that can help them with that, but also I can also take steps to help them myself. And so like the more I learn, I realize that makes me a better tool for my friends, my family, all my relationships, because as I learn, I'm able to use that and help others as well. As I talk to people about whatever their problems are, I can also go like, oh, that might also help this person. That also, oh, that's why they don't like it when I do this thing or whatever. And so you having a degree that you don't use as oh yes, this is my degree that I'm using on you, whack. It's, hey, I know what makes this dynamic work, and I can lean into that more, and I can take the proper steps to kind of maneuver through that. I can see that being a very helpful tool. Do you besides like curriculum, are there other ways that you've used that?
Just personally dealing with personalities.
Okay.
The coworkers that I'm around, various people that I interact with, by having the knowledge and the tools to not just ignore people,
right,
or put them off, or stomp away angry, I can
Right.
understand, hey, they're going through something,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to affect me.
Right.
And in fact, if I display a positive attitude, I let people know that, yeah, I get it, but I don't have to be part of it.
Right. Right.
So it's helped me in interpersonal relationships in my work environment.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I've been fascinated, and it was interesting listening to your, like, how you got into this psychology of people interacting. And it's interesting because it's similar but different to mine, and like even the peer pressure. Sorry, my brain's been mulling this over throughout this conversation. Because like for you, peer pressure was you have someone that can back you up.
Yeah.
For me, it was I have no attachment to society. Like I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how much of this was our mother teaching us that what other people think of us does not it has no effect on us.
Part of it.
But at the same time, I also felt like an alien in this planet for most of my life. Depending on when I asked certain people, and you might have an interesting thought on this, but like, when did I start asking like these deep philosophical questions that are way above where I was supposed to be in life, But I know I talked with Mommy, and Mommy was saying that like around 4 or 5, I had the skill to hear a word in context correctly and I'd use it the same day.
Yeah.
And like I know I was asking bigger questions than my age because I'd asked the other people in like Sunday school and in class days and stuff like that, and they're like, I just want to know why the sky is blue. I'm like, okay, but like, I'm going to like the next level, and like I'm curious on your perspective on this because again, older brother, you got to deal with me. When would you put like in the timeline where I started like asking those bigger questions? I don't know if I ever asked you those bigger questions specifically, but
that's harder to pinpoint because I feel like you were starting to ask, every 2-year-old, every 3-year-old, every 4-year-old asks a million questions.
Right.
But you didn't ask the typical questions.
Right.
But that's not atypical for our family.
Sure.
So I think it's harder to pinpoint because I think right when you started doing that was when I went to college. And so I was coming back and we'd visit with you.
That would be about 5 years old then.
Yeah. But we'd visit with you for the weekend, and you weren't asking a lot of questions about life and philosophy. You were asking questions about, so what did you do this week?
Right.
Why
curiosity.
Why did you bring your laundry home? Things like that.
Wait, was that an actual question I asked you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this was before I had a driver's license.
Right.
And freshman year, Mommy said, come home every week. You'll do laundry for free because the college you had to pay for laundry.
Sure.
And I'll give you driving lessons over the weekend. I thought, okay, well, I didn't have a strong push to get my driver's license yet, but it was a skill I knew I needed to have. I was 17 in college and didn't drive.
Right.
All my friends drove. They got their licenses at 16.
Right.
And back then, this was before the 25 rule, where you had to be 25 before you drove someone not related.
Yeah.
So I got rides with my friends all the time, but I didn't want to rely on them solely for transportation.
Sure.
So every weekend I'd come home, bring my laundry, and spend the weekend trying to do homework and visiting with family. And so I'd have my books open, and you'd be sitting there looking over my shoulder at my books and going, why are you reading this book? It's boring.
I do remember those days. I did not understand growing up at all. You want to know why? And like looking back, because like I remember when James got to that point too, and he went from being the like fun brother that would like, oh yeah, let's go out and do stuff, to like, I'm studying.
Yes. And
it annoyed me because it's boring. And now that I know what my brain does, like boring means useless.
Yeah.
So
I see no value in this.
Right, exactly. And to this day, I understand the value, but I still don't see the value. Like,
Yeah.
still studying to me, unless it's something that I like a lot, is still like, it feels pointless. It feels like a waste of time. But,
Yeah.
so I just, like, my brain just clicked, like, I do remember those days of, like, they're here. We have toys.
Yeah.
We have skateboards and bicycles, and you're here on looking at a book that doesn't have fun pictures in it. That looks like work.
Yeah. I still remember the first weekend I came home. Like, we had the first week at school, at college. We had a big weekend, so we were there for the whole weekend and then the whole next week. So it was the second weekend. Came home and brought my laundry, and Mommy had saved all the rest of the laundry for me to do while I was doing my laundry. And she didn't clean the bathroom because that was my job.
Oh, gosh.
And I had to explain to her that I spent all week cleaning the bathrooms in my dorm.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, then you're a professional. We don't want to do this at my house. And so John and I were doing all of the chores that we still had assigned. Mommy didn't reassign them to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, James and Rose should have stepped up, and you and Ben could have stepped up. Ben wasn't quite there yet. But,
So Ben was like 3? 2?
Let's see. Ben was born in 97. He was 2.
Yeah,
when
2?
I went to college.
Come on, Ben, get on those dishes.
Come on.
Those knives aren't that sharp.
You know, you could drag your diaper around the table and at least sweep. No, but after a semester of this, John and I realized that the return was not worth it because we spent all weekend taking care of you and Ben and the house and not doing homework. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't getting any driving lessons. My first semester, I got 1 hour behind the wheel. Mm. Christmas break, I got 1 hour behind the wheel. Second semester, I came home every other weekend.
Uh-huh.
I got 2 more hours behind the wheel. And I went, well, we'll try something else.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you had slightly atypical questions, but for a 4 or 5-year-old whose big brothers have gone to college, you wanted to know where we were all week.
Curiosity, sheer curiosity versus asking.
Do you do anything? From your point of view, we vanished for a week or two.
I know you left. I just don't know what you like. To me, there's no like. Oh
we
college
didn't exist when we weren't home with you.
You like. I knew you went somewhere, and I knew that you were coming back at some point, but I didn't understand what you did there, even when we visited you, because it's like, oh yeah, look, he's hanging out with friends. Not understanding that we had scheduled that to visit you at the time that you weren't doing stuff.
Right.
It just felt like, hey, I never see them go to classes. They're just gone.
Just hanging out in the dorm.
I guess I never realized like that time frame was about the same time that you were not in the house, and when you came back, it was me finding out what happened when you were gone, not actually asking the questions that were going through my head. Yeah, but like, so anyway, back to the main point of like my detachment from peer pressure. Well, and this is where I always feel bad because like I didn't feel like my peers were my peers in the first place.
Yeah.
At that age, I had maybe not an unfounded superiority complex, which I know sounds really mean, but like I'm sitting there like, this is like everything they're working on, every question they're asking, everything they're doing just seem menial and boring and stupid. Like, so
that was partly just our growing up.
Well, yeah,
because both of us had a certain level of intellectual maturity and some emotional maturity beyond our peers. When my peers were collecting baseball cards with their the money that parents give people for no reason.
Sorry. I like the way you phrase that. Allowance, yes. We got it at the same time. Allowance, yes.
I mean, we
Most
didn't get
people,
an allowance.
Yeah.
And so whatever money we worked for, we saved for certain things like camp. Yep. We wanted to go to camp.
You know, for me, it was after camp, it was a digital camera. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But our thought processes were molded differently than
Yeah.
our peers.
But my point is, like, it left me with a detachment from what everyone else considered my peers. It's not my peers. If you can have an actual intellectual conversation with me, you're my peer. Which led to me to be having intellectual conversations with people that are, like, several years older than me. But so that's part of it. Like, that alienation from humanity means that when you have a social construct that you've developed, such as a game where if I touch you and make physical contact with you, you must play this thing, has no bearing to what I do. I could choose to do that. I can decide to participate in that if I so chose, but I had no obligation. I don't know even feeling of that. And that even applies to today. Like, I've done karaoke once in my life. It's when one of my closest friends was leaving, and I wasn't sure when I was going to see him again, and he requested that I do it as a farewell gift. I'm like, okay. That was it. I've had a pretty decent size restaurant chanting my name because my friend's like, Joel, and everyone gets on it. I'm like, have fun chanting my name randomly. You're going to feel really awkward in a few minutes when nothing's happened. But I'm like, I don't care. You can chant all you want. Your opinion of me at this moment and whether or not I comply is nothing. I don't care. At the end of the day, like, as long as, like, for me, it's more about the long-term stuff versus, like, oh, Joel, why didn't you go up and do it? It's like, because I didn't want to. I told you that. I told you I wasn't going to. Chanting my name several times, for me, is actually going to make it worse for me to actually have... if you had stopped, there's a chance I might have reconsidered. But the peer pressure actually pushes me away.
And that's part of our stubbornness.
Well, yeah. Yeah, but it's just interesting from you, like, having that, like, you have a person that will back you up. To me, going, like, I just don't...
I didn't feel connected.
Didn't feel connected enough to have it affect me. But, like, that's it's fun to hear other people have that similar disconnect to peer pressure of, like, wait, what's so hard about saying no? Like, I mean, growing up homeschooled, hearing other people talk about, like, the just say no to drugs stuff, and I'm like... I'm sorry, what's the appeal of drugs? Because if you look at it, like, okay, you feel good for a few moments.
If you do.
I'm peak, like, everything goes as best case scenario. You feel good for a little bit. Then you feel really bad, and then you feel worse, and then you need that to feel better again. That doesn't sound pleasant at all. So what's the appeal here?
Yeah.
Like, just say no. Yeah. I'd also just say no to getting punched in the face. To me, there's no difference.
But there's something in that, and dealing with relationships, a lot of people take drugs as an escape route. They're
Sure.
escaping from something. But for someone like me who's very grounded in a relationship with my twin brother or with my wife or with anybody, I've got a strong support network, I don't need to escape. For someone like you who's not connected or don't feel connected,
Yeah.
you don't need to escape.
Yeah.
You're already out. I won't say out of it.
Well, that's true too, but
Sometimes. But you were already out. You didn't have that pressure, and people feel that pressure from the world, and that's what drugs are trying to help them escape or alleviate, the stress and pressure of the relationships around them. And when they don't have healthy relationships feeding into them, then they have this outlet, and that's what's appealing to them. It's not the high, it's the escape.
Right. Most I need to escape is, like, imagination.
A vivid imagination does more wonders.
Video games, you know. But I mean, that's why I use Dungeons and Dragons, is because well, that's why I also like running Dungeons and Dragons for people, is because it lets them off gas in a controlled environment where the consequences, though they be imagined but they're just in a bubble. Like,
right.
if they
It's a pocket universe.
Yeah, it's
Whatever
a pocket
happens
universe.
in
If
there,
they have a, there's consequences that I give them, but it's at the end of the day, they can leave that alone and like, hey, I got upset and I said like I did something to somebody that, you know, if this is real world and, you know, my supervisor does something and I react that way, I don't have a job anymore. In this, it's just like, okay, great, that's it, and then they can move on. And for me, like it's that's the most level of escape I need. Where like there's everything else, it's like, yeah, I just sorry, my niece and nephew are playing in the background. Just kind of zone that out, guys.
They're having a giggle fit because they know they're supposed to be quiet and they couldn't keep quiet. Now they're giggling because they're making noise and shing each other.
I think those are the funniest.
Do you remember when we did that once? It was at Hopi and it was past our bedtime and somebody was sleeping over with us. Was it the Yandles, maybe?
I think so.
Because I think they're the only ones who would have ever slept over. I don't think
anyone else has slept over with us.
So it had to be the Yandles.
Yeah.
And Chaz and Terry, their parents, were in the front room with Mommy and Daddy, and we were in the 2 bedrooms. And James, who was in the little bedroom, had been moved into the big bedroom. So it was the guys' room and the girls' room, you know, separating us out.
Yeah.
And somebody started giggling. I don't know why. And of course, the first person starts giggling, and
everyone else starts giggling. Yeah.
And then somebody in the other room snorted.
Well, that's it. That
was it.
That's game.
Within 2 minutes, all the parents were in the doorways going, "What's going on?" Because we were choking on our chortles and Snickers, and we were dying.
I don't have a specific memory of this, but it sounds like something that would happen, and it sounds like something vaguely familiar.
And it was really funny because the Yandles had 6 kids, we had 6 kids at that point, and normally 12 kids in a house is really loud, but with the Yandles, normally, with all 12 of us, we were very quiet. But that one night we just couldn't hack it.
No.
We lost it. It was over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are that like group of friends. Like, I don't know how many of these memes you've seen, but like that one friend that when it's serious you don't look at. That's all of us. It's literally all of us. We're like, this table's very tabley today. It's like, yes, I know what is going on outside of this, like my little bubble that I'm trying not to look at my siblings, because if we look at each other, it's over. It's over. We're all laughing, and this is a very serious situation right now.
First the grin, then the glimmer, then the grunt, then the snort, then the snicker, and then it's over.
Yep. Yeah, no. Yeah. Trying to remember where we were at.
Where did we get from there?
Oh.
Well, we were talking about escapism.
Oh, yeah.
Laughter's a great escape, by the way. Especially in a group of trusted friends or family.
Yes. And it's also a great coping mechanism. So, I guess I know you probably haven't heard this, but for the audience that just listened to the last 2 episodes, which I literally titled A Funny Conversation About Serious Depression with Jackie, Bender, and our sister, who all of us, our coping mechanism is laughter, talking about depression. I had to like preface that with like, we take the subject very seriously. Me and Jackie deal with depression. Rose doesn't, but she deals with both of us.
Yes.
But like, it's mostly laughter in this conversation about depression. And we're like, don't worry, we're never going to laugh at each other. We will laugh about everything else though. But yeah, so we all laugh a lot. And we all are very imaginative. But yeah, so like, I mean, I guess like, yeah, that not having to deal with that peer pressure on the same level as anybody else would also lead to that. And like, you know, it's really interesting talking to you about like, that like escapism with the peer pressure and drugs and drug use and stuff like that. The peer pressure with that and our ability to kind of negate a lot of those things. And I think because of your degree, like, you're able to give insight into that. And it's interesting because, I mean, our family is pretty intelligent across the board.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when we stop and actually, like, look at ourselves as a family dynamic and go, oh, this is why. Instead of just like, oh, yeah, we're just a pretty decently happy family. It's a, well, this, that, the other thing. And, like,
we have really intelligently healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
We have a really healthy support group.
Right.
In our siblings.
Right.
And our parents. We have really strong role models. So there's a list of things that we have that are advantageous to us in combating both the peer pressure and the pressure of escapism.
Mm-hmm. I have it's a big change of topic, and I don't want to get too far into this, and it's been a while since we've actually talked about this, me and you, but, like, so you were actually on, like, the zoning board for...
The Elkhorn Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, sorry.
So it's the city of Elkhorn. It's the planning commission. We advise the city council, and we also give direction within limitations to the planning department of the city of Elkhorn.
Okay. So, as far as it pertains to, like, your degree in communication, interpersonal relationship, and, like, relationship psychology, like, has that played a part in your ability to do that?
Oh, definitely. The communications role is huge.
Right.
It's foremost.
That's presentation of yourself and what you have, what you're bringing, right?
It's actually more important on the listening end, because the planning commission isn't about putting...
I just gotta say really quick, I feel really dumb right now because my brain, like, yeah, communication, and I went to the layman understanding of talking.
But the primary role of the planning commission, as I see it, is to be a face of the government to the public and the voice of the public to the government. So we listen to what the people are coming to us with and look at the law and go, okay, this is where we've got some give, where we can make a decision on this.
Right.
Or we say, this is something the city council has to decide, but here is our viewpoint on it.
Sure.
And what the public is telling us, that's what we tell the city council. Hey, maybe it's time to revisit this policy. Maybe it's time to rewrite this law. Okay. So communications are primary because we listen, and it's very important in an active listening role. And this is something that comes from the psychology aspect.
Right.
As a therapist, active listening is when I hear what you say and tell it to you. Yeah,
and so active listening is something that I try and do on my show, and I hope it's noticeable. I try and make it noticeable to the people because, like, it makes sure that for me, who sometimes takes things too literally or has a different understanding of things, that's why I use analogies oftentimes, is lets them think about it and go. Because if I just repeat it back verbatim, often I'm like, yes, that's correct. If I repeat it in a different way, they can, like, yeah, it is, because that makes them think about, okay, his understanding in his mind, this is what it means. Does that make sense with my understanding?
Right.
But it helps me also make sure that I'm in flow with what they're saying and not getting the wrong point out of what they're saying. So, like, active listening is, I think, part of the reason why I'm able to ask such great questions. And so it makes sense that with, like, helping citizens be heard is making sure that they see that when they actually speak versus just having to wait for results, which are out of your hands, I would say.
In some cases.
Yeah. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, I can do this right now. And that, for a lot of people, I feel like that's the only way they can tell whether they were heard or not.
Yeah.
Where you are bringing a degree that helps them feel heard right then and there, no matter what decisions were made, whether by you or anybody else.
Yeah.
That's
and
interesting.
the counseling end comes into play when I'm looking at the emotional state of the people coming up.
Sure.
Because sometimes there are people that are very upset about something their neighbor did. Mm-hmm. And I get to see both sides of that. Both neighbors come to us and say, the driveway's cut in half in the wrong spot, or, whatever it is. I get to see that and help them process the distinction between their anger and frustration and the emotional baggage they bring to the problem, and pull that problem out, set it to the side and go, the city can't deal with your neighbor. The city can only deal with your driveway. So it's been interesting to see how that plays.
That's interesting. So I find myself as the mediator between lots of people. Like you can attribute that to my INFJ, you can attribute that to my middle child, you can attribute that to many, many things, but I'm the one that everyone brings the problems to. And I realize that I have a very easy ability to see past the stuff they bring to it to add to the problem, and are able to offer the solution. But I struggle heavily with the helping them see the extra baggage that is brought to the issue that is not the actual issue. It's like, well, okay, so the driveway is pink. So what? That doesn't change the fact that she didn't come to your bridge game on Saturday. Like, it's unrelated, but, you know, according to whatever, it does need to be this certain set of colors or whatever. I don't know. But, like, you can, like, you're able to help them see the additional stuff they're adding to the issue, where I that's something I apparently need to work on, is helping them see it. Because, like, when you're talking to them, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see that too. It's like...
Actually, most of the time, my job as a planning commissioner is helping them step out of the emotional stuff.
Well, yeah, that's... Yes. That's
distinguish what the point that we can debate in this
Right.
setting is.
Right.
It is important for me to understand what emotional baggage they have,
Yes.
but I'm not pointing it out to them.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
What I do is I say, regardless of
Right.
status, emotions, relationship, the Planning Commission can only deal with this.
Yeah. Okay. I see the difference in how I phrased it. I understood that correctly. I didn't phrase it correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah. But being able to, like, separate that and just be able to deal with the thing. Yeah.
And this is my professional communicator cycle happening.
Right. Is intake, listening.
And if it doesn't match, let's try that again.
Right. Yeah. That's something I try and do.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. And really quick, I want to pause for a second, audience. If you guys are interested in hearing about his job with the city planning and everything like that, let me know. Because I almost wanted to bring that up, but I didn't know enough about that job to ask questions about that right now. It's just something that's brought up, and then I don't usually ask too many questions about it, oddly enough.
It's my secret job.
It's not a secret. It's one of the first things that I think about, because I feel like you're one of the hardest people to, like, describe what you do.
So my daughter,
Uh-huh.
Zipporah, is now 9,
Uh-huh.
but her Sunday school teachers would ask her, "What does your daddy do?" And she gives a shrug, like,
So really quick, for my own sake, okay, just
"Do you have a half an hour?"
no, just like if you were to have a business card, or a business card that crosses everything you do, what would
Everything?
Well, okay, like the stuff that you would
The
actually,
stuff I'm getting paid for
yeah, what would that
at church.
Anything that you'd put, like, on like a resume or like something like that. Well, within reason. I'm trying
Business
to
card or resume, that's
just-
a big difference.
distilled, because
Yes.
like for me, I wouldn't put, like, you know, think tank editor on my business card, although I'm really good at taking someone's idea and going, here's how you can fix it. I wouldn't put that as something I do regularly. That's not something that I'd call a profession. That wouldn't be anything that I would put I might put that on a resume possibly, but I would never put that on a business
So let me
card.
make it easy for you.
Okay.
Because this is something that plays into the idiosyncrasies of our family,
Okay.
plays into relationships in a
Okay.
big way, and really is the best way I can describe what it is that I do
Okay.
best. When I was in 4th grade,
Mm-hmm.
and we were studying the body of Christ, and, you know, some people are hands, and some people are feet, and some
Mm-hmm.
people are mouths. What do you think your role is? in the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
In 4th grade, I was like, I think I'm a tendon.
Okay.
And everybody I tell that to goes, what? But my greatest strength is connecting people.
Okay.
I connect people, whether it's in business.
Okay.
The front desk at Shadow Mountain knows they call me if they don't know who is in charge of something, because I will know who is in charge of that.
Sure.
They don't call me for everything.
Right.
But if it's like, I don't know who to talk to about this,
Mm-hmm.
well, Paul will know.
Okay.
Because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I connect people.
Okay.
Sometimes it's connecting people into programs. I have that happen a lot with the Awana program, where I run into people who are like, I wish I could do something with kids. I've got the perfect program for you.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not Awana. Sometimes it's Sunday school. I know who to connect people with.
Sure.
I know a guy.
Right.
It partly plays into our Italian
I
heritage.
was going to say the Italian. It's like,
But
I know a guy.
that is the relational aspect of who I am, and how I've developed is I observe people.
Sure.
I observe people closely and at a distance.
Sure.
One of the young women in my interpersonal relationships class 22 years ago, we're still friends. Not close friends at all.
Sure.
But we still go to the same church. We're still part of the same campus. I see her every year. I see her kids, watch them grow up, know her husband. And I offered her some encouragement during Summer Blast, which is what we call our VBS program. Because I saw that she was having a hard day. And I just told her something that she needed to hear. Because that's part of how I connect things. I connect things, I connect people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I do, whether it's planning commission, I'm connecting the people to the law and the people who make the decisions in the government, if I'm not the one making that decision, but I make sure that connection is solid. At church, I connect people with the rooms and setups that they need to be successful in their ministries. In Awana, I connect leaders and kids to God's Word. In Sunday school classes, sometimes it's just the connection of the baby. I connect to the babies, and they realize that. I'm the calmer and damper of crying babies most of the time. In my adult Sunday school class, I connect my small group with God's Word in a way that it makes sense for a family, opening their eyes to how all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable. All Scripture. Right now I've been doing a series on minor prophets.
Oh, fun.
And the family.
Okay.
Give it a few moments and you'll go, wait, the minor prophets are about the Messiah's return or judgment on nations. What does that have to do with the family? It's a great mini-series.
Okay.
But
sorry, I was waiting for like weird. This sounds like a sales pitch.
Hey.
You're like, and check it out.
I don't have it up on anything, but I have it all printed out.
Cool.
But
so if you come to his house and ask for a copy.
I've got it digitally too.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm kidding.
Please don't. But that's what I do. I connect people with what they need.
Yeah.
And if I put something on my business card, I wouldn't necessarily put tendon.
Right.
But I am a connector.
Okay.
So that is what my vital job in the body of Christ, in the local church, in business are.
Okay.
I see a problem, I connect it with the person who can solve it. I see a person in need, I connect them with service that can help.
Okay. I really do appreciate the answer, but what I was looking for was like job title.
You know, the job title was so hard. My official job title at Shadow Mountain is Operations Supervisor. Because
that's
it's
a big
so
term.
generic.
Yeah.
Because I do so many different things. I have the ability to step into a role. Do you remember the TV show Pretender in the 90s?
Vaguely.
Okay. It's about a guy who's a super genius, and he can literally step into any role.
Right.
From fighter pilot to brain surgeon in a day. He studies, he gets in there, he pretends he is, and he is for the day.
Right.
and then he moves on. I'm not that, but I have the ability to learn, and I realized a long time ago, I not only learn things, I retain things well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a backup person for a lot of the roles we have on campus, and I can handle a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a troubleshooter. I'm a fire extinguisher.
MacGyver.
I'm a MacGyver. I'm more than a jack of all trades.
Right.
But I'm not a king of all spades.
You've been on one today with your not quite right phrases, but not also malforms either.
I like making people think.
See, for me, it's not thinking. I understand what you said. It's more of my like reeling from like, that's not the words you say next.
Wait, that's not how it goes.
Like, it makes sense, and I get that you're doing something different, but it's like, no, that's, I don't know what to call that anymore.
Yeah.
But, okay, so going back to the actual question I asked, like, so you're operations supervisor at Shadow Mountain
Community
Church. As far as the city goes, what is there a title that goes with that, or?
I'm a city planning commissioner.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the official title.
Gotcha.
I've got business cards, actually business cards from the city. I don't give them out much because the only information on there is for the planning department desk, because they can't give our information out because
then
the
you
public,
have people are coming up to your door going, "Hey, fix this."
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not our role.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty sweet gig. We get paid $150 per meeting.
Okay.
The meetings can range from 15 minutes to 3.5 hours. And we get 2 scheduled a month, and the last 4 have been canceled.
Okay.
The 5th one back we did have, and
Okay.
I actually have to find out if I've got a meeting this coming Tuesday night. But it's a funny thing, because when I applied for this house for the loan, at the time I was teaching at the college. Did you know I was a college professor for a semester?
Yes, I do remember that.
Adjunct.
Yeah, I do. I've told people before, because, like, again, your job title has been so.
I do a lot.
It's
So,
changed a few times.
for
but
one
like,
semester-
I'm like, my brother was an adjunct professor, but not the one that's a history teacher.
Right. So for one semester, I was on the planning commission and I was teaching at San Diego Christian College. I was actually teaching interpersonal relationships, my favorite class. And so I was applying for the loan for this house, and they didn't like the planning commission stipend. They said, that's not really, we're not going to qualify you on that, but we'll qualify you on the college professor stipend. And 10 years later, I only worked that one semester for the college, and I'm
you've
still
been on
on the
the
planning commission. Not that it's a regular source of income,
Yeah.
but I'm still in that position.
I find it funny, those kind of life hack, loophole, whatever things, because in December, my wife, she worked at CBU for a couple semesters, and so she has the school's first bank. She doesn't work at a school she hasn't in a long time, but she did, and she qualifies. So I was like, okay. And I've seen quite a few people like, oh yeah, I worked at my school for this a summer or something like that. I got the bank, and it's like, okay, sure. I guess it's a one-time qualification type thing, but you know what? Hey, I'll take it. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. It's just something that I find funny, because I remember there's one episode where Rose and my friend Tama interviewed me, and they're asking me to describe my family. I'm like, I don't know how to describe my family. Like, well, what do they do? I'm like, I started going through. I'm like, I don't know how to title half of the stuff my family does.
What does James do? I don't know at the moment. He went to Missouri to start a home church.
I think he is currently
Learning how to
apprenticing.
weld?
Yeah, apprenticing a welder. I know he hunts for food sometimes.
Sometimes.
That's when it's like, John and Paul go off to college. What do you do? I don't know. Vader's gone. James is out there in the forest somewhere with his family. I know he has
Little House on the Prairie.
kind of.
Little House in the Big Woods.
He's got a welding torch and a gun. That's all I really
I thought it
know.
was a bow and arrow he shot the deer with.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought it was a gun.
I don't know. I'd have to...
Yeah, but it's like I started going down. I'm like, James used to work for Verizon and then Frontier when they got bought out as a fiber optic cable install. Like he installed fiber optics and like there's like a bunch of things. Like I can tell you what my family used to do and what their job titles used to be, but like I got stuff where I got to you. I'm like, well, I know he referred to himself as a glorified janitor for a while. I don't know what his job title is now because I know he's got a better position, kind of.
Yeah.
Still don't know what he does.
I'm one of the salaried employees at church because I am extremely flexible and extremely dependable.
Yeah.
So it's handy that I get to work an extra half hour after everybody else goes home to finish a job that needs done. And whether that is plunging toilets, delivering hoses, setting up chairs, I'm the guy for that.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm also the person that's the last person to leave work because I clean up after all the activities are done. So I'm not the last person to leave work because kitchen always gets out late because dinner. I'm not usually working past 9. There have been occasions, but usually those were my choice to work at midnight because that's when my brain works. But like it's funny because like I start looking at like most of our families, the people that are the last to leave things, and some of us now are getting paid to be the last people to leave things.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was a very interesting conversation.
I think we wandered a little more in the last half hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the first part was pretty on topic, and then it kind of like exploded into just like bleh things. But hey, that's what this is all about. It's all about curiosity taking us on a trip, and it sure did today. But again, Paul, I just thank you so much for being on. This was a blast for me.
You're welcome. Next time we'll diagnose your childhood trauma. No, it is.
That'll be a bonus episode.
It's kind of fun because it's interesting the way that we grew up separated by enough years to have differing perspectives on what life was like.
Well, I mean, it's something similar to when I had John on, of like, because technically the oldest in our family, but like going from there to like the oldest of what we call the second half. So like you have John, Paul, James, and Rose, and then you have 7 years, and you got me, and like that like shift, and it's really interesting because like I don't know if I talked about this with Ben, but it was really, really crazy for me because Ben, again, he was 2 when you guys left for college.
Yeah.
It took him till what? This is where my numbers go bad because I don't remember if it was 7 or like 13. I know it's a big gap, but it was somewhere between there that he actually
finally realized we were his brothers, not his uncles who visited
or
every
family
once.
Friends. Is what I think what he told me is like, it's like the Andals or all these other people that we just kind of go visit and they kind of come over sometimes. Like it's like, oh yeah, those are our friends, John and Paul. And I'm like, no, Ben, you know how I'm your brother and James is your brother. John and Paul are also your brothers.
Yeah, that was weird when I realized that Ben has no memory of living in the same house as either of us.
No, and it's baffling for me because like I wasn't quite like when that was happening. I wasn't quite at the spot where I could understand. Ben's too young to understand that they're gone because when I was his age, I had it more of a memory than he did. So like if we had switched, I would have known you guys were brothers. Best guess. I mean, I can't factually say that, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, I have a memory.
You feel like,
but like I have a memory back further than Ben does as far as like actual age. But like, I mean, there's no way to concretely tell. But like, it's weird because like I sit there going like, but he should know this. How can he not know this? And then like as I get older, I'm like, yeah, no, like that makes sense that most people would not know that. Like when your brothers leave for college.
It's really weird because John and I have old memories, young memories.
Yeah.
We remember things from about 1 year old on.
Yeah.
concrete.
Yeah.
We can verify.
Right.
And Ben
doesn't.
Does he even remember Hopi Place as a home?
I don't think so. We should have the siblings on to just kind of talk about stuff because
it would be fun.
It's quite interesting because now we've just recently recent's kind of a vague term, but like in the last few years been talking with like Beth and Ezra and trying to help them understand that you guys are siblings and we have the additional barrier of Down syndrome as a learning disability, like trying to help them understand, like they do know now like who the siblings are and that your family and everything like that, but they had even like they weren't even born yet when you guys were off at college, and then sorry, my memory's a little.
Beth was born freshman year. No, between freshman and sophomore year. She was born in August.
Yeah, but like
and then Ezra was born senior year of college.
Oh yeah, yeah, but like I don't think they've ever lived in the same house as you. No. So like they don't have even as much as Ben did. But we like, no, this is your family. And like, it's just interesting because like, I don't know many families that are that spread out. Because when Ezra was born, you were how old?
22.
22, yeah. Like, you were literally old enough to be his father.
Mommy and Daddy were 22 when I was born.
Yeah. And so like, it's like that age gap is, every once in a while I'm like, oh yeah, it's a pretty big significant age gap.
When we were in college, John and I were in college, and our friends found out that Mommy and Daddy were having another sibling. They're like, same parents?
Well, I mean, that's also with the kids. Everyone asks the same thing, like, all the same parents? Like, yes, we're all full blood relatives. There are no, mistresses. There's no marriages, no step, no merges.
Yeah.
All of them are my full family, and you can tell. But yeah,
especially when we all get together.
Oh my god, yeah, yeah. It's quite interesting when we're together. And like with outsiders, it's a lot. It helps me see a different perspective when I'm like, my friends come over for Thanksgiving, and I'm like, don't worry about it. But it's interesting sitting down with like the older siblings. Like again, from the 4 because it's 8, so I'm the oldest of the last 4. John's the oldest of the.
You're the first of the second 4, but you never attained to the first 4. Using the terminology of David and his mighty men. Yeah,
but it's just interesting, like talking with now both of you, like about the past and going like, yeah, it's interesting to see your perspective of that because like we don't necessarily sit down at family gatherings and talk about when I was 5 years old or 6. Like, we don't really, it's not a topic of conversation normally.
It comes up, though.
It does come up sometimes, but, like, in these interviews, I found out, like, it's interesting to, like, make those connections between, like, oh, so it's not just me. Because growing up, it felt like it was just me. And then going, like, actually talking to my siblings purposely with questions and a goal in mind, going, like, oh, my gosh. Like, okay, so it's not just me, more so than I already know we're pretty similar, but there's times where like you have that experience as well, like with the peer pressure. It's like, oh, this is a thing that we all
this is a Circo trait,
right? Versus a me trait, and like it's just interesting. But yeah, that was a very long. Thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome.
I just realized that's usually when I go into my whole sign off and.
And we got another topic in.
How many more topics can we squeeze into an end of the show?
I'm afraid we probably need to end the show.
Yes, we do. All right. Normal business now. As always, a big shout out to Moana Dodd for the wonderful graphic art design. Nope. That's not how you use that language. The cover art for my podcast. She is a graphics design artist, and you can check her work out at milanadodd.com, and her Instagram will also be linked down there as well, because I feel like I always get that one wrong. I think it's Milana's Design on Instagram. Go check out December's photography at decembernoel.com, and on Instagram at December Noel Photo. She's posting a photo a day this year, so go check out all her fun stuff there. Braden is going to be releasing some new episodes of Zero Credits Accounting on YouTube on his Coaster Gnome YouTube channel, which will all be linked below. Also, big news, and I think we might have talked about it briefly, but I'm actually launching a Patreon. So if you guys want to hear some stuff that happened before the episode, there's some bonus content that's going to be posted there. So go check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Curious Joel, I think, but that'll also be linked below. I don't know. I literally launched it yesterday, and I haven't looked at the URL that closely, okay?
The bonus content is a treat.
Yes, I will give you a teaser to that of it actually is talking about Patreon and some fun tidbits there. But there's also some fun conversation that did not pertain to anything, unlike, the last half an hour. But yeah, go check out that. That helps support me and helps me, invest into this channel more. Channel? Podcast? Whatever this is, the thing I've been doing for like 2.5 years. But helps support this podcast, helps me invest more into what I'm doing, and gives you guys a better product in the end. But if you support the channel, you also get chances to sit down and talk with me on Discord and stuff like that. So please check that out. If you like what you heard, please share this with someone that you think will enjoy it, whether the episode or the show. And if you could rate and just leave a comment about what you liked about this. And, always hit me up about what you think of things, okay? You can... Oh, I almost forgot to tell you where. You can find me... where can you find me? You can find me on Twitter at Joel Circo, on Instagram at CuriousJoelcast, or email me at curiousjoelcast@gmail.com. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you all in the next episode.